The Zeltharian research ship Cosmic Dawn moved slowly through the dark space where Earth's solar system once existed. Captain Vextar stood on the bridge, watching the viewscreen display floating chunks of rock and metal. These pieces were all that remained of a world that had once been home to billions of humans. For 3 months now, his team had been collecting artifacts from the debris field. They found pieces of human technology, fragments of their buildings and remnants of their ships. Everything told the same story. The humans had destroyed themselves in a great war 200 years ago. The entire galaxy had watched from far, away as Earth went silent forever. "Captain, we have found something unusual," called Dr. Kalish from her workstation. The tall, blue-skinned scientist turned her large eyes toward him. Her voice carried excitement mixed with confusion. Vextar walked over to her station. His forearms moved gracefully as he steadied himself against the console. "What have you discovered, Doctor?" "Our deep scanners have detected a structure buried inside the largest asteroid fragment. It appears to be artificial. The metal composition matches human construction methods." On the screen, Vextar could see the irregular chunk of rock floating in space. It was roughly the size of a small moon. According to their records, this piece had once been part of Earth's natural satellite before the final war tore everything apart. "Could it be another weapons facility?" Vexitar asked. They had found several of those already. Empty missile silos and destroyed defense platforms were scattered throughout the debris field. "No, Captain. The energy signatures are different. This structure appears to be intact and still powered. Minimal power, but definitely active." This was strange. Everything else they had found was dead and cold. The humans had been thorough in their self-destruction. Nothing had been left functional. "Prepare a survey team," Vextar ordered. "I want to know what the humans left behind." 2 hours later, the survey shuttle approached the asteroid. The structure was buried deep inside, protected by hundreds of meters of rock and ice. Their cutting tools made quick work of creating an entrance tunnel. Lieutenant Zarek, the team's security officer, led the way with her weapon ready. Behind her came Dr. Kalish and 2 other researchers. They wore environmental suits and carried portable lights that cut through the darkness. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Their lights revealed smooth metal walls covered in human writing. Banks of computers lined the walls, their displays dark but not destroyed. In the center of the room stood rows of cylindrical containers, each one the size of a small room. "By the stars," whispered Dr. Kalish. "These are cryogenic preservation units." The team moved closer to examine the containers. Each one had a small window made of transparent metal. Inside, they could see human forms floating in a blue preservative liquid. The humans looked peaceful, as if they were simply sleeping. "How many are there?" asked Vextar through the communication link. Dr. Kalish counted quickly. 47 units, Captain. All appear to be functional and maintaining their occupants." "Are they alive?" "The biosensors indicate yes. Minimal life signs, but definitely alive. These humans have been in suspended animation for over 2 centuries. The discovery sent shockwaves through the research team, and then through the entire Galactic Collective when they reported it. For 200 years, everyone believed the humans were extinct. They had been studied as an example of how a species could destroy itself through violence and war. The humans had been considered primitive and dangerous. Their technology was crude compared to most collective members. Their society was divided into competing nations that fought constantly. They had barely achieved space travel beyond their own solar system before their civilization collapsed. Now, suddenly, there were living humans again. The Collective's High Council met in emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species debated what should be done. Some wanted to leave the humans in their frozen sleep. Others suggested waking them all up and relocating them to a safe world where they could be monitored. Captain Vextar received new orders 3 days later. He was to wake up one human for study and questioning. The council wanted to understand how these humans had survived and what they might know about their species' final days. "Which one should we choose?" Dr. Kalish asked as they stood in the cryogenic chamber. Vextar studied the containers and their occupants. The humans varied in age and appearance. Some wore military uniforms. Others were dressed in civilian clothing. Each container had a data panel with information written in human languages. "This one," he said, pointing to a container near the center of the room. Inside was a human male who appeared to be in his 30s. His uniform indicated he was a military officer. The data panel showed his name as Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison. "Why him?" asked Dr. Kylish. According to his records, he was a strategic analyst, military, but not a frontline fighter. He should be able to answer our questions about human society and their final war. He might also be more cooperative than a common soldier. Dr. Kylish activated her medical scanners and began examining the chosen container. His vital signs are stable. The preservation process appears to have worked perfectly. I can begin the revival procedure immediately. "What should we expect when he wakes up?" asked Lieutenant Zarek. "Confusion, certainly," replied Dr. Kylish. "Fear, probably. The last thing he remembers will be going into cryogenic sleep. Now he will wake up to find his world destroyed and his entire species extinct except for the others in this chamber. He will need time to accept his new reality." Vexitar nodded. "We will be gentle but cautious. Humans can be unpredictable when stressed. Have security teams ready, but keep them out of sight. We do not want to frighten him more than necessary." The revival process began slowly. Dr. Kylish drained the preservation fluid and began warming the container. Automated systems started delivering oxygen and nutrients to stimulate the human's sleeping body. Monitors showed his heart rate increasing and brain activity returning to normal levels. "How long until he wakes?" asked Vextar. "Perhaps an hour. The process cannot be rushed without risking damage to his brain." As they waited, more crew members gathered in the chamber. Everyone wanted to see a living human. In their minds, humans were almost mythical creatures now. A species that had shown such promise before destroying themselves in spectacular fashion. "What do you think he will tell us about the final war?" asked one of the junior researchers. "Perhaps he will explain why they chose mutual destruction over peace," suggested another. Dr. Kylish monitored the revival process carefully. The human's body temperature was rising steadily. His breathing had become regular and strong. Brain scans showed normal patterns returning. "He's beginning to regain consciousness," she announced. Through the transparent cover of the container, they could see the human's eyes moving beneath his closed lids. His fingers twitched slightly. His breathing changed from the deep, slow rhythm of artificial sleep to something more natural. Captain Vextar felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They were about to make contact with a member of a species everyone thought was gone forever. What would this human think of the galaxy that had developed in his absence? How would he react to learning that his people were considered extinct? More importantly, what secrets might he carry about humanity's final days? The collective had many questions about the war that destroyed Earth. Perhaps this survivor could finally provide answers. The monitors showed increasing brain activity. The human was very close to waking up. Soon they would speak with the first living human anyone had seen in 2 centuries. None of them suspected that this moment would change everything they thought they knew about humans, the galaxy, and their own place in it. Jake Harrison's eyes opened slowly. The first thing he noticed was the bright white light above him. His body felt heavy and cold, like he had been sleeping for a very long time. Everything seemed foggy at first, but his mind cleared quickly. He could hear voices speaking in a language he did not recognize. The sounds were strange, with clicks and whistles mixed in with the words. Jake kept his eyes mostly closed and listened carefully. There were at least 4 different speakers, maybe more. "His vital signs are stabilizing perfectly," said a voice. That sounded female. "Heart rate is increasing to normal levels. Brain activity shows full awareness." Jake understood these words perfectly. Someone was speaking his language now. He opened his eyes a little more and saw tall figures standing around him. They were not human. The closest figure was blue-skinned with large, dark eyes. She wore a white coat like a doctor and held a small device that beeped softly. Behind her stood another alien creature with 4 arms and gray skin. Several others were scattered around the room, all watching him with great interest. Jake's training kicked in immediately. He had been a military analyst, trained to gather information quickly in unknown situations. Without moving his head, he used his eyes to scan everything he could see. The room was made of metal with smooth walls. There were computers and screens everywhere. The technology looked advanced but had a design he did not recognize. He counted 7 aliens in the room. None of them appeared to be carrying weapons, but that did not mean they were not dangerous. The room had one obvious exit, but there might be others he could not see from his position. "Can you hear me?" asked the blue-skinned female in careful English. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Jake decided to respond. "Yes, I can hear you." His voice was rough from not being used for so long. "Where am I?" "You are safe," she said in a gentle tone. "My name is Dr. Kylish. You have been in cryogenic sleep for a very long time. We found you and brought you back to consciousness." Jake sat up slowly, acting like the movement was difficult. In reality, he felt surprisingly strong. The preservation process seemed to have worked perfectly. He was pretending to be weak and confused while he gathered more information. "How long?" he asked. "Over 200 years, said the gray-skinned alien with 4 arms. "I am Captain Vexitar of the research vessel Cosmic Dawn. We are part of the Galactic Collective. 200 years. That was longer than Jake had expected, but not impossible. The mission planners had prepared for various scenarios. He kept his face neutral and did not show surprise. "What happened to Earth?" Jake asked the question he was supposed to ask. Captain Vexitar's expression became sad. "I am sorry to tell you this, but Earth was destroyed in a great war. Your entire species was thought to be extinct until we found you and the others in this facility." Jake let his face show what they would expect to see: shock, grief, and confusion. Inside, he was noting how easily these aliens believed their own story. The deception had worked perfectly. "Others?" he asked. "There are 46 other humans in cryogenic sleep in this facility. You are the first we have awakened." Dr. Kylish moved closer with her medical scanner. "We need to run some tests to make sure you are healthy. The revival process can sometimes have side effects." "Of course," Jake said. He swung his legs over the side of the container and stood up. The movement was smooth and controlled, but he pretended to be a little unsteady. As Dr. Kylish ran her scans, Jake continued to observe everything around him. The technology was interesting, but not as advanced as he had expected. The aliens seemed to rely heavily on external devices and computer systems. Their physical capabilities appeared limited compared to humans. "Your physical condition is remarkable," Dr. Kylish said as she read her scanner results. "The preservation process worked better than we thought possible. Your muscle tone, bone density, and organ function are all perfect." Jake nodded. "We had good technology for cryogenic storage. It was one of our most successful programs." "Tell us about the final war," said Captain Vexitar. "What do you remember about the events that led to Earth's destruction?" This was the key question. Jake had to give them information that would support the story they already believed while not revealing too much. "The nations could not agree on resource distribution," Jake said slowly, as if the memories were painful. "There were fights over water, food, and energy. The military leaders on all sides became desperate. Someone fired the first nuclear weapon, and then everyone fired theirs." "But surely there were attempts at peace," asked one of the other aliens. "There were," Jake replied. "But fear and pride were stronger than wisdom. Each side thought they could win if they struck first. In the end, everyone lost." The aliens exchanged glances. This story matched what they had observed from a distance. They seemed satisfied with his explanation. "What was your role in the military?" asked Captain Vexitar. "I was a strategic analyst. I studied enemy movements and capabilities. I helped plan defensive operations." Jake was giving them exactly what his fake records would show. "Were you involved in the final battle?" "No. I was selected for the cryogenic program before the worst fighting began. The plan was to preserve some of our people in case the war could be ended peacefully. I went into sleep, believing there was still hope." Dr. Kylish made notes on her device. We will need to study your psychology and social structures. This information will help us understand how to prevent similar conflicts in the future. Jake nodded. I will help however I can. But first, I need to understand what has happened in the galaxy since Earth was destroyed. What is this galactic collective you mentioned? Captain Vexistar seemed pleased by the question. The collective is a peaceful alliance of over 200 species. We work together to share resources and knowledge. There has been no major war in the galaxy for over a century. How do you maintain peace with so many different species? Jake asked. Through careful diplomacy and resource management. Each species contributes what they do best and receives what they need. Conflicts are resolved through negotiation, not violence. Jake found this very interesting. A galaxy-wide government that had lasted a century without major wars. Either they were very good at diplomacy, or they were very good at hiding their conflicts. What about military forces? He asked. Surely you need some defense against raiders or hostile species. Each member species maintains small defense fleets, explained Captain Vextar. But we coordinate our efforts through the Collective Defense Council. Most conflicts are resolved before they require military action. Jake was learning valuable information. The collective was a loose alliance, not a strong central government. Each species maintained its own military forces. There was no unified command structure that could respond quickly to threats. Where will I go now? Jake asked. I cannot return to Earth. That is still being decided, said Dr. Kalish. The High Council is debating whether to wake the other humans and find you all a new homeworld. In the meantime, you will stay with us while we continue our research. Research? Into human culture and technology. Your species achieved remarkable things before the final war. We can learn much from studying your artifacts and talking with you. Jake nodded. I understand. I want to help. My people made terrible mistakes, but perhaps some good can come from studying those mistakes. Over the next several hours, Jake answered many questions about human society, technology, and history. He was careful to give them information that supported their beliefs about humanity, while revealing nothing about the truth. The aliens seemed satisfied with his cooperation. They treated him with kindness and respect, like a valuable research subject who needed to be kept comfortable. Jake played his role perfectly. He was the confused survivor of a dead civilization, grateful for rescue and eager to help his new friends understand his people's tragic history. But inside, he was counting and calculating. He was memorizing the layout of the ship, the capabilities of the crew, and the weaknesses in their technology. He was gathering intelligence on the Galactic Collective and their military capabilities. Most importantly, he was preparing to send a signal that would change everything. 3 days had passed since Jake Harrison woke up. Captain Vextar sat across from him in the ship's main conference room. The captain wanted to explain how the galaxy worked now and where humans might fit into it. The Galactic Collective maintains peace through something we call the Resource Balance Protocol, Captain Vexistar explained. His forearms moved as he spoke, showing charts and data on the room's large screen. Each species contributes what they produce best and receives what they need most. Jake listened carefully and asked questions that made him sound curious but harmless. How do you decide what each species should contribute? We have a council with representatives from every member species. They meet once every galactic year to review needs and capabilities. Disputes are handled through mediation committees. What happens if a species refuses to cooperate? Captain Vextar looked uncomfortable. That rarely happens. Most species understand that cooperation benefits everyone. If there are problems, we use economic pressure and diplomatic isolation until they return to the agreement. Jake nodded as if this made sense to him. Inside, he was noting how weak this system really was. No central authority, no unified military command. Just a loose collection of species who had convinced themselves that everyone would always play nicely. Could humans join this collective? Jake asked. That would depend on what humans could contribute and whether your species has learned from its past mistakes. Dr. Kylish entered the room carrying a datapad. Jake, I wanted to show you some examples of collective technology. Perhaps you can help us understand how human technology compared to what we have now. She activated a holographic display that showed a sleek starship. This is our latest deep space exploration vessel. It can travel between star systems in just a few days using quantum fold drive technology. Jake studied the design carefully. The ship looked impressive, but he could see several obvious flaws. The power distribution system was inefficient. The hull design created unnecessary stress points. The weapon placement was poor for both offense and defense. Very advanced, he said out loud. Human ships were much smaller and slower. The quantum fold drive works by creating temporary bridges through subspace, Dr. Kailash explained proudly. It allows us to avoid the dangers of traditional faster-than-light travel. Jake asked several technical questions about the drive system. Dr. Kailash answered them eagerly, happy to show off collective achievements. Jake absorbed every detail while making notes on his datapad. May I see the technical specifications? He asked. As an analyst, I'm curious about the engineering solutions you developed. Of course, said Dr. Kailash. She transferred the files to his datapad without hesitation. Jake spent an hour reviewing the drive specifications. The technology was clever but inefficient. He could see at least 12 ways to improve the design immediately. With human engineering knowledge, they could probably double the speed and cut the power requirements in half. This is fascinating, he told Dr. Kailash. Humans took a completely different approach to faster-than-light travel. We used brute force methods that were much less elegant. What kind of methods? She asked. Jake described fictional human technology that sounded primitive, compared to what the collective used. He made human engineering seem crude and wasteful, while secretly analyzing everything they showed him. Over the following days, the aliens shared more of their technology with Jake. They showed him their energy weapons, their planetary defense systems, and their communication networks. Each time they expected him to be amazed by their superior capabilities. Jake played his part perfectly. He asked the right questions and made the right comments. But privately, he was building a complete picture of collective military capabilities and weaknesses. Their weapons were powerful but required large energy sources. Their defense systems were automated but could be confused by proper electronic warfare. Their communication networks were fast but used predictable encryption methods. Most importantly, their military doctrine was entirely defensive. They had not fought a real war in over a century. Their tactics were designed for dealing with pirates and rebels, not with a coordinated military campaign. Jake, said Captain Vextar during one of their daily meetings, we need to discuss what will happen to you and the other humans. Have you decided? The High Council is still debating. Some members want to relocate all humans to a safe world where you can rebuild your civilization. Others think it would be better to integrate humans into existing collective worlds. Jake pretended to consider this carefully. What do you think would be best? Integration might be easier. Human culture contributed many valuable things before your final war. Art, literature, scientific methods. These could enrich collective society. But we would be a very small minority. Human culture might disappear entirely. That is a valid concern, Captain Vextar agreed. Perhaps a compromise solution. Some humans could integrate while others maintain a separate community to preserve your cultural heritage. Jake asked more questions about potential human worlds and integration policies. Each answer gave him more information about collective population centers, resource distribution, and administrative procedures. Captain, Jake said carefully, I want to access your ship's database to learn more about the galaxy. If humans are going to find a place here, I should understand the political situation better. Captain Vextar hesitated. Our database contains sensitive information about collective member species and their capabilities. I understand your concern. But if humans are going to join the collective, we will eventually have access to this information anyway. I promise to use it only for educational purposes. Dr. Kailash supported Jake's request. He has been completely cooperative, and his analytical background might help him identify potential problems with integration that we have not considered. After some discussion, Captain Vexistar agreed to give Jake limited access to the ship's database. He set up security protocols that would allow Jake to read general information, but not access military secrets or communication systems. Jake thanked them politely and began his research immediately. He started with basic information about collective species and worlds. Population numbers, industrial capabilities, trade relationships, and political structures. The aliens monitoring his database access saw exactly what they expected. A curious human learning about his new galactic neighbors. They did not notice that Jake was memorizing specific details about military bases, fleet positions, and resource stockpiles. Jake's analytical mind processed the information quickly. The collective had over 200 member species, but only about 30 of them had significant military capabilities. The rest were either too peaceful or too primitive to be major factors in a conflict. The major military powers were spread across the galaxy with no unified command structure. They coordinated through committees and councils that moved slowly and avoided controversial decisions. Most interesting of all, Jake discovered that the collective had been gradually weakening over the past 50 years. Member species were becoming more focused on their own interests and less willing to support collective actions. Several recent crises had been handled poorly because no one wanted to take decisive action. "This is very helpful," Jake told Captain Vexistar after several days of research. "I'm beginning to understand how complex galactic politics can be. What are your thoughts about where humans might fit in?" "Humans have always been good at finding solutions to complex problems. Perhaps we could contribute to improving collective decision-making processes." "In what way?" Jake pretended to think carefully. "Human military doctrine emphasized rapid response to threats. We developed methods for making quick decisions even when information was incomplete. These techniques might help the collective respond more effectively to crises." Captain Vextar looked interested. "Can you give me an example?" Jake described several theoretical scenarios where faster decision-making could have prevented problems. He made his suggestions sound helpful rather than threatening, but he was actually pointing out major weaknesses in collective emergency response procedures. "These are excellent insights," said Dr. Kailash. "Perhaps humans could serve as strategic advisors to help improve collective efficiency." "I would be honored to help," Jake replied. "Humans have made many mistakes, but we did learn some valuable lessons about organization and leadership." That night, Jake lay in his assigned quarters thinking about everything he had learned. The collective was even weaker than human intelligence had estimated. Their military forces were scattered and poorly coordinated. Their political system was slow and indecisive. Their technology was advanced but inefficient. Most importantly, they trusted him completely. They saw him as a grateful refugee who wanted to help his rescuers. They had no idea that he was gathering intelligence for a species they thought was extinct. Jake activated the small communication device hidden in his clothing. It was time to send his first detailed report to Human Command. The assessment phase was complete, and the results were better than anyone had hoped. The galaxy was ready for harvest. Jake Harrison sat in the ship's recreation room with Dr. Kailash and several other crew members. They had been asking him questions about human culture for the past hour. The conversation seemed casual and friendly, but Jake knew it was still part of their research. "Tell us about human art," said Lieutenant Zarek. "We found fragments of paintings and sculptures in the debris field. The creativity was remarkable for such a violent species. Humans have always used art to express emotions they could not put into words," Jake replied. "Our greatest artists often came from periods of conflict and struggle. How sad that such beauty came from pain," commented Dr. Kailash. Jake nodded. "Humans learned to find hope even in dark times. That ability helped us survive many challenges throughout our history." "What was the darkest time before the final war?" asked another crew member. Jake pretended to think about this question. There were several periods when humans almost destroyed themselves. Wars, plagues, environmental disasters. But we always found ways to rebuild and continue. "How did you survive those earlier crises?" Captain Vextar had joined the group and was listening carefully. "Humans are very good at adapting to new situations," Jake said. "When one approach fails, we try something different. We never give up completely, but adaptation was not enough to prevent the final war, observed Dr. Killish. Jake looked sad. No, it was not. The final crisis was too big and happened too fast. There was no time to find a peaceful solution. Captain Vextar sat down across from Jake. I have been wondering about something. The cryogenic facility where we found you was very well hidden and protected. How did your people have time to build such an advanced preservation system during a global war? This was the question Jake had been waiting for. It was time to begin revealing the truth, carefully and gradually. The preservation program began long before the final war, Jake said slowly. Human leaders knew that our species had a tendency toward violence. They wanted to ensure that some humans would survive even if the worst happened. How long before the war did this program start? About 50 years. It was originally designed to preserve humans during long space voyages to distant star systems. But the military leaders realized it could also serve as insurance against extinction. Dr. Killish looked puzzled. 50 years seems like a very long time to prepare for a war that might not happen. Human strategic planning often worked on long timescales, Jake explained. We learned to think generations ahead rather than just years ahead. Were there other preservation facilities? Asked Captain Vextar. Jake paused as if deciding whether to reveal sensitive information. Yes. Several others were built in different locations throughout the solar system. I do not know if any of them survived the destruction. This was technically true. There had been other facilities, but they were empty decoys designed to support the deception story. How many humans were in the preservation program? I am not sure of the exact number. Perhaps a few thousand across all the facilities. Lieutenant, Zarek leaned forward. Were all the preserved humans military personnel? No. The selection criteria included scientists, engineers, doctors, artists, and historians. The goal was to preserve human knowledge and culture, not just soldiers. Jake was laying the groundwork for the next phase of revelation. He needed them to understand that the preserved humans represented the best of human society, not desperate refugees. Jake, said Captain Vextar carefully, there is something that puzzles me about the final war. Our long-range sensors detected the nuclear explosions and the destruction of Earth's major cities. But the timeline seems strange. What do you mean? The destruction happened very quickly, almost simultaneously across the entire planet. Most wars build up gradually with smaller conflicts before the final devastation. Jake had expected this question eventually. The aliens were not stupid, and their records would show inconsistencies if examined closely. Human military doctrine emphasized decisive action, he said. When our leaders realized that war was inevitable, they chose to end it quickly rather than let it drag on for years. But that would require incredible coordination between enemy nations. How could they synchronize their attacks so precisely? Jake appeared to struggle with painful memories. The final war was not between human nations. It was a civil war within the global government that had been established 20 years earlier. This was a crucial lie that reframed the entire story. Instead of primitive nations fighting each other, Jake was describing an advanced unified government that destroyed itself. A global government? Dr. Kalish sounded surprised. Our records indicated that humans were still divided into separate nations. The United Earth government was formed in secret, Jake explained. The old national boundaries were maintained for cultural reasons, but actual power was centralized under a single authority. Why was this kept secret? Many humans were not ready for global unity. The government leaders believed that gradual integration would be more successful than forced unification. Captain Vextar exchanged glances with his crew members. This information changed their understanding of human society significantly. What caused the civil war within this global government? Jake sighed deeply. A disagreement about humanity's future direction. One faction wanted to focus on expanding into space and finding new worlds. The other faction believed humans should perfect life on Earth before seeking new territories. That seems like a conflict that could be resolved through compromise. It should have been. But both sides became convinced that the other was planning to use military force to impose their vision. Fear and paranoia escalated until both factions launched preemptive strikes. Jake was creating a narrative that made human destruction seem like a tragic accident rather than inevitable barbarism. The aliens were starting to see humans as a more sophisticated species that had made one terrible mistake. "How long did the Civil War last?" asked Lieutenant Zarek. "Less than 6 hours. Both sides had prepared for years and had weapons positioned around the globe. When the fighting started, everything happened at once. That explains the simultaneous destruction pattern our sensors detected," said Dr. Killish. Jake nodded. The United Earth government had become very efficient at coordinated operations. Unfortunately, this efficiency also made the destruction more complete. "Were you part of this global government?" "I was a strategic analyst for the space expansion faction. My job was to identify suitable star systems for human colonization." This revelation excited the aliens. Jake was not just a survivor of a primitive war. He was a representative of an advanced human civilization that had been planning interstellar expansion. Did humans actually colonize other star systems before the Civil War? Jake hesitated, as if revealing classified information. There were several long-range exploration missions launched in the years before the conflict. I do not know what happened to them. Where did these missions go? The destinations were classified. Each mission was assigned to survey a different region of the galaxy for potentially habitable worlds. Captain Vextar leaned back in his chair. His expression showed he was processing this information and its implications. "Jake, if there were human colonies or exploration missions in other star systems, some of your people might still be alive out there." "It is possible," Jake admitted. "But those missions were designed for one-way journeys. Even if the colonies survived, they would have no way to return to Earth or contact each other." "We could search for them," suggested Dr. Kylish excitedly. "The collective has explored most of the galaxy. If there are human settlements, our databases might contain records of contact with them." Jake shook his head sadly. "The missions were sent to regions far beyond what your people have explored. The colonists would be completely isolated and probably assume that Earth and all other humans were destroyed centuries ago. But they might have developed new technology during their isolation. Human adaptability combined with 2 centuries of independent development could have produced remarkable advances." Jake appeared to consider this possibility. "Perhaps. Humans do tend to innovate rapidly when faced with survival challenges." The conversation continued for another hour, with Jake gradually revealing more details about the fictional United Earth government and its space exploration programs. Each revelation made human civilization seem more advanced and more tragic. By the end of the discussion, the aliens saw Jake not as a refugee from a primitive species, but as the survivor of an advanced civilization that had destroyed itself through a single catastrophic mistake. They had no idea that Jake's story was carefully designed to prepare them for the truth they would soon discover. Humans had not destroyed themselves. They had simply wanted the galaxy to believe they had. And now it was almost time for the real human civilization to reveal itself. Captain Vextar stood in his private quarters, staring at a report from the Collective Intelligence Division. Something was wrong with Jake Harrison's story. The more they investigated, the more questions arose. "Captain," came Dr. Kylish's voice, over the communication system. "Please come to Medical Bay immediately. There is something you need to see." Vexatar hurried through the ship's corridors. When he arrived at the medical bay, he found Dr. Kylish and Lieutenant Zarek standing over a holographic display showing Jake's biological data. "What have you discovered?" he asked. "Jake's physical capabilities are far beyond what we expected," Dr. Kylish explained. "His muscle density is 30% higher than our records indicate for humans. His bone structure is reinforced in ways that suggest genetic modification. His nervous system shows adaptations for enhanced reflexes and information processing. Could these changes have occurred during cryogenic preservation? No. These modifications would have taken generations to develop. Either our historical data about humans is completely wrong, or Jake represents a much more advanced branch of human evolution. Lieutenant Zarak activated another display. I have been monitoring his behavior through the ship's security cameras. Watch this. The screen showed Jake in his quarters the previous night. He appeared to be sleeping, but every few minutes he would open his eyes and scan the room for exactly 30 seconds before closing them again. His movements were precise and controlled. He is maintaining a watch schedule even while pretending to sleep, observed Zarak. That level of discipline suggests military training far more advanced than anything in our records. Captain Vextar felt a cold sensation in his stomach. What else have you noticed? He memorizes everything he sees. Room layouts, computer passwords when we type them, crew schedules, ship systems. I thought he was just curious, but the pattern is too systematic. Dr. Keelish pulled up another file. I decided to test his knowledge yesterday. I asked him technical questions about human space travel capabilities. His answers were too detailed and too accurate for someone who claimed to be just a strategic analyst. Show me. He described propulsion systems, navigation methods, and ship construction techniques that would require years of engineering training to understand. When I asked where he learned these things, he said he picked them up from reading reports. Captain Vextar reviewed the data for several minutes. The evidence was clear. Jake Harrison was not what he claimed to be. Where is he now? In the main computer lab. He requested access to our communication systems to send a message to the Collective High Council. He said he wanted to provide additional information about human history. All 4 of Captain Vextar's arms began moving at once, a sign of extreme stress among his species. We need to stop him immediately. The 3 aliens rushed toward the computer lab. When they arrived, they found Jake standing calmly at the main communication console. His fingers moved across the control panel with the confidence of someone who had used this type of equipment many times before. Step away from that console, ordered Lieutenant Zarak, drawing her weapon. Jake turned around slowly. His expression was completely different now. Gone was the confused, grateful refugee. In his place stood someone who radiated quiet authority and dangerous competence. Too late, he said simply. The message has already been sent. Captain Vextar moved closer. What message? What have you done? I have informed my people that the observation phase is complete. The Galactic Collective has been thoroughly evaluated and found to be ready for integration into the new order. Observation phase? Dr. Keilish's voice was barely a whisper. Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Did you really believe that humans destroyed themselves in a civil war? That we were primitive enough to commit species suicide over political disagreements? The evidence was clear. We detected the nuclear explosions. We observed the destruction of Earth's cities. You observed exactly what we wanted you to observe. A carefully staged performance designed to make the galaxy believe that humanity was extinct. Lieutenant Zarak kept her weapon pointed at Jake, but her hand was shaking. That is impossible. No species could fake their own extinction on such a scale. Humans have always been good at deception and long-term planning. While your people were celebrating the end of the dangerous human threat, we were spreading throughout the galaxy in ships you never detected, establishing colonies on worlds you never found, and studying every species in the collective. Captain Vexistar felt like the floor was disappearing beneath his feet. Why would you do such a thing? Because we learned early that the galaxy was full of species who feared human potential. Better to let you think we were gone while we prepared for the day when we would be ready to claim our rightful place. Jake moved away from the communication console and walked toward the center of the room. None of the aliens tried to stop him. They were too shocked by his revelations. Those exploration missions you mentioned, said Dr. Keilish. They were not lost colonies. They were advanced scouting forces. Very good, Doctor. For 2 centuries, human observers have been watching, learning and reporting back to our hidden command structure. We know the location of every collective military base, the capabilities of every species' weapons, and the weaknesses in your political system. But you were in cryogenic sleep for 200 years, Jake laughed. I was in cryogenic sleep for exactly 72 hours while this facility transmitted automated signals to make you think it had been operating for centuries. The real cryogenic pods contain volunteers who agreed to be awakened when the galaxy was ready for contact. Captain Vexistar finally found his voice. Contact? You mean invasion? I prefer the term integration. Humans do not wish to destroy the collective. You have done an acceptable job of maintaining galactic peace during our absence, but peace without progress is stagnation, and stagnation leads to decay. What do you want? We want what we have always wanted, to explore, to grow, to push the boundaries of what is possible. Under human leadership, the galaxy will advance farther in the next century than it has in the past 1,000 years. Lieutenant Zarek's weapon was now pointed directly at Jake's chest. We will not allow you to enslave the galaxy. Enslave? Lieutenant, you misunderstand our intentions. We offer partnership, not servitude. Those species that accept human guidance will prosper. Those that choose to resist will be given the same extinction that we once faked for ourselves. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Emergency lights flashed red as automated systems detected incoming vessels. What is happening? Demanded Captain Vextar. Jake walked to the nearest viewport and looked out at the stars. My message was not just a report. It was also a signal beacon. Human ships have been waiting in nearby systems for decades, cloaked and ready. Through the viewport, they could see massive shapes materializing out of empty space. Human warships, each one larger and more advanced than anything in the collective fleet, were decloaking around the research vessel. How many ships? Whispered Dr. Kylish. In this sector? Perhaps 50. But there are similar fleets positioned near every major collective world. We have had 2 centuries to prepare for this moment. Captain Vextar stared at the human fleet, surrounding his ship. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering, bristling with weapons and defensive systems that made collective technology look primitive by comparison. You planned all of this. Every detail. From the moment your people first detected radio signals from Earth, we knew this day would come. The only question was whether it would happen through negotiation or conquest. Jake turned away from the viewport and faced the 3 aliens. I am authorized to offer you a choice, Captain. You can transmit a surrender message to the collective, High Council, and recommend immediate cooperation with human integration protocols. Or you can remain silent and let your people discover humanity's return through more direct methods. And if we refuse to cooperate, then you will be confined to quarters while my people take control of your ship. The outcome will be the same, but your crews will be treated as prisoners rather than allies. Lieutenant Zarek was still pointing her weapon at Jake. I should kill you right now. Your weapon will not penetrate my personal defense field, and even if it could, my death would simply accelerate the timeline for human reveal operations. My people do not require my permission to proceed. Captain Vextar looked around the room at his crew members. They were frightened and confused, facing a situation none of them had imagined possible. How long do we have to decide? Jake checked a device on his wrist. The human fleet will begin broadcasting to collective worlds in exactly 1 hour. If you choose to send a cooperation message, now would be an appropriate time. What will you tell them? The truth. That humanity has returned from extinction, that we possess overwhelming military superiority, and that we are prepared to assume leadership of galactic civilization. Species that accept human authority will be treated with respect and given opportunities to prosper. Those that resist will be removed from positions of power. Captain Vexitar realized that his choice was simple. Cooperate and possibly save lives, or resist and watch the collective be crushed by forces they could not possibly defeat. I will send the message, he said quietly.